In Lagos specifically, we all know the dirty December season is the peak season in the Nigerian market. So you can go as high as 2x on your pricing in dirty December. Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. This video is, I'm dressed very informally, very casually, but this video is a serious video, but I'll try to speak to you from a layman's perspective, which I am, by the way, I am lay. This video is pretty much going to guide you on how to price your short-term rental and pricing strategies that have worked for us in Lagos, Nigeria. So one of the reasons why I actually emphasized on Lagos, Nigeria is because everything about this market is just very peculiar. If you live in Lagos or if you know anything about Lagos, things are just done differently here. There's a saying that usually flies around that whatever you've learned in business school, once you get to Lagos, just throw it out the window because none of that shit works, and it is fact. I remember when I started my short-term rental business in 2019, I was, reading all these different things about pricing strategy and how people had done it abroad. I was trying not to go into the market blind because we did not have a lot of templates for people to follow as far back as 2019. Most of the Airbnbs you see on most of the listings rather you see on the Airbnb platforms were usually hotel rooms and things like that. So people it was not a very popular thing. There were no templates for people to follow. So, started off and, like I said, everything that I had studied, that I had read online almost didn't work. I now decided that I was pretty much going to follow what my competitors or potential competitors were doing, which takes me to my first point, which is you need to have a competitive pricing strategy. That is strategy number one. Competitive pricing, like the name says, is very simple. You have to look at, and you can do this thing manually. I know abroad there are softwares you can use to determine what your competition is charging. I know AirDNA, I know Price Labs. I haven't used them yet in Lagos, but what I personally used to do was pretty much, I used to go down and dirty, look for apartments that were very similar to mine, in the same area, had the same amenities, offered the same things in terms of facilities that were inside the home. So for example, a lift, a swimming pool, a gym. Location was also very important as well. Size of the home. So I would go around and not physically, go online and then see what these people were pricing and then price myself lower. That is what you do if you're a new entrant to the market, right? Because you're trying to attract people to your home. So it's important for you to keep your prices competitive. When I say lower, I don't mean you should outprice yourself or underprice yourself. So if, for example, an apartment that is very similar to your listing is charging 120K, you can charge 110 or 100 for a short period of time. So once you're able to get eyes on your properties, you can now bump your price up to what your competition is charging, or even sometimes higher if you feel that you offer more. Like there's some things that are intangible. For example, your customer service. Your customer service might be impeccable and nobody is doing the things that you're doing. So you can't really add a price to that, but there's value to that and you must attach something to that value that you're offering. So it's a value add. So a second pricing strategy that I definitely love is the dynamic pricing strategy. So that one is pretty much figuring out what the peak, off-peak, and mid-peak seasons are in your location and then pricing your home according to that. For example, in Lagos specifically, we all know the dirty December season is the peak season in the Nigerian market. So you can go as high as 2x on your pricing in dirty December. Easter time as well is peak season. Summertime is somewhere in between. The public holidays are also peak season as well. Nigeria is not a place that, for example, when you're in the US, right? If Beyonce is happening to have a concert at a particular time, say for example in New York, you'll notice that hotel prices go up. That's why I said Nigeria is such a peculiar market. That doesn't happen when Burna Boy has a concert. I'm sorry, nobody cares. You know what I mean? So that is the difference. So you can't use their pricing strategy. Call that dynamic pricing, but that kind of dynamic pricing that is attached to maybe like things like concerts, events, and stuff like that doesn't really work in Nigeria. For Nigeria, it is more of holidays or a particular time of the year that you see that prices bump up and then your apartments will be booked at whatever price that you put it on. So for example, like I mentioned, 30 December is one time that you should definitely bump up your prices. I say 30 December, but also you have to be very strategic with that 30 December time. People come into Lagos around the 15th till probably the end of January. So it will be advisable to keep your prices as they are from the 1st to the 10th/12th of January, and then now bump your prices up between the 15th to the 28th, and then you can now bring it slightly lower early January, because 14th, 15th till like 28th, 29th are the peakest of the dirty December season, because that is when everybody is here. And believe me, you can actually do as high as, some people were doing 3x, 4x of their regular pricing, and their apartments were getting booked. We were not too greedy. We just did 2x and it was fine. But in the earlier months in December, we kept our pricing regular. So you also have to be, very cautious. You have to be aware of what's going on in the market. It's a trial and error thing, you know. So also ask people that are hosts, you know, if they don't mind, they can share their books with you, you know, to see, okay, how did this month go? Because I mean, we've been in this business for 6 years, so I kind of have a good idea of what the good months are, what the bad months are, what the mid-range months are. So I'm able to price my apartments based on that. And also still considering what my competition is charging at the moment. Another thing to also consider, because I've said dynamic pricing, I've said competitive pricing, but another thing to also strongly consider is your expenses. Your expenses obviously will determine what you are going to charge. Right now in Lagos, people that are on band A, which is the areas that have over 20 hours supply of power, 6 months ago, they literally increased our electricity tariff by 300%. Automatically, we knew that we had to increase our pricing. It was just a no-brainer. We didn't increase it immediately. We wanted to see what our power bill was going to be like. But that 300%, believe me, it reflected. It was insane. Prior to that, we were spending maybe like anything between 80K to 100K on power per apartment. Now sometimes we spend 400K. It is actually that ridiculous. So we knew that we had to increase our prices. Another thing you also have to consider is what you as a business owner wants as your take home. By take home, I mean, so after all the expenses, after every single thing, you've paid your expenses, you've paid your taxes, your salaries, everything, what do you want your profit to be? Ideally, business school says your profit should be anything between 20 to 30%. If you do 30%, you're actually doing solid business if you have 30% profits after all this. I feel like it is very personal. It's based on what you as a person want. So if you're fine with making 15% profit per year and you want that profit to spread for a longer period of time, then be my guest, you know. So there's no hard and fast rule. It just depends. If your expenses increase, then you wouldn't really be too bothered about, you know, increasing your pricing and things like that. And that's fine, you know what I mean? But if you have if it's like 30% or whatever, and then you see that your expenses are really eating deep into your costs, then you know that it's time for you to increase your pricing. Our tax advisors always say, what you want as profits really depends on your own business. You know what I mean? Obviously, like I said, you also cannot outprice yourself out of the market. It is very important. It's such a competitive market. Like this building that we're currently in, there are 20 units here and 18 units in here are for short-term rental. So you have to be aware of what your competition is pricing and price yourself very similar or slightly higher, like I said, if you feel you offer more value. So finally, I would also add that you should also consider inflation. I know that in Nigeria, just like I keep saying, you really can't predict. Today, inflation rates might be 10%. Tomorrow is something percent, right? But you need to be able to create some sort of buffer, you know, so that it's not every single time there's like an inflation in the country, you now have to constantly keep increasing your prices. Like for example, obviously we all know last year, I hope things have settled down now, last year 2024, things were quite insane in the country. So today you're buying a cleaning supply, for example, for 3K. Tomorrow you can go back into the market and it is 6K. That is how crazy it was. So you're literally buying things like double the price of what you got it literally yesterday. And you have your suppliers giving you invoices and they tell you this invoice is only valid for 3 days. And I don't blame them because you don't know what's going to happen in 3 days' time. So when you're pricing, you also have to consider that, right? And another thing you can also do is get alternative. There's always an alternative to something. So back to the cleaning products. If your cleaning product is 3K and it has now jumped up to 6K, you can actually find an alternative in the market that fits your budget. Or start to use more natural home remedies that will not compromise on your quality. That is very, very important. So in conclusion, 2 pricing strategies that have worked perfectly in Lagos, Nigeria: dynamic pricing, competitive pricing. And things that you must consider while you're pricing your apartments is your expenses, your own personal goals for your business, and then finally inflation. So I hope my point makes sense to you. And if you have any questions, let us know. And don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button. So until our next video, take care.